Okay, guys, welcome to today's session for Leadership and Ethics. This is for the CRN 10559 Monday. So, the first thing I want to do is I want to review the assignments for presentations during the week. So, let me just share my screen and bring up the crap. I have to do that all again. Hello, Miss Hamilton. All right. So, are you guys seeing this list here with the presentation dates?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, most people will remember that various chapters of the text have to be presented. So, we have a couple. Well, we have Mr. Dublin to put in.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon.
Hi. Good afternoon. Who's that?
Hamilton.
Yeah. Yeah. If I finally got your audio working. All right. So, I would like to put Mr. Hamilton into. Right, we have 1, 2, 3 here, 1, 2, 3 here. I'd like to put Mr. Hamilton with Cindy with for presentation 6. Would that be fine? Would that be okay, guys?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, no problem, sir.
I keep on saying Hamilton. I'm saying Hakeem.
Dublin.
Dublin, yeah, not um, uh, 10. All right, so the island is in the wrong place. All right, so we need to touch base with Cindy Gadar and Stephanie Ruiz, both of who are in class today. Guevara, you were assigned to chapter 8, complex organizations from the Exploring Leadership text. Yourself, Christopher, Alexander, and this young lady here, Nadia Tyner, we have not seen her come to class yet. It's a little concerning because I sent her an individual message. I think somebody had messaged me about not being able to contact her as well. So I'm seeing her active in the classroom, on the online classroom, but I'm just not understanding what's happening with that situation there. So um, let me. Did I, Sean? Did I give you an email address to contact her?
Sorry?
You weren't here yet last week.
No, this is my first class here.
All right. So her email address would be her ID number at my.costa.edu.tt, and that would be. Let's go to that for a sec. She would be 0002765. Right? You got that?
Yeah, I have it here.
And Christopher Alexander, you're having some problems with his audio. This is the second class he's attending, and he's not really having much luck. Is 72953. I think he's in the chat as well, but I don't know if Ms. Ruiz has been able to organize that just yet. All right. How many people were able to look at the presentation for today on the e-classroom? From the vast silence there, I expect that it's nobody. Did you all
Sa-
get
Silence is, silence is consensus. That's I was able to, but I didn't.
finished?
um,
So I started watching
The
it.
recording?
It was a recording, yes.
Yes, so I am kind of like midway through that one.
Yeah, it's a bit long. In fact, all of the presentations kind of long, but all right.
So, sir, I have started on my chapter and stuff like that, so that's kind of why I wasn't there.
Uh-huh.
But I did do the that Kersley temperament test. That's really good. Like I encourage everybody to do it.
You mean
It
the
kind of helps
yeah,
you
yeah,
figure
but
out
you
certain
kind of
things
jumped the
you
gun
really
on
want
that.
to.
We need to do understanding self before we do. Oh, but you're dealing with that chapter,
Yeah.
right? Well, then that kind of makes sense for you to do that as part of. But you, of course, you're just going straight to the chapter. You have to produce, and then to produce your presentation, and you forget about anything else, right? That's basically it.
No.
Yeah, no, that's how it's all.
No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's how it is. So you didn't get a chance to go through this presentation yet.
Not just yet.
You're right. Okay, so this is the introduction and the preface and chapter one. Okay, so I don't understand how you're reading the book by ignoring the opening chapters and stuff like that. So that's quite interesting. So we'll see how that goes.
so
All right.
we just trade yourself in the ocean. We
Yeah, I
come out of
find
the
so.
sun.
Just jumping in the deep end, right? Well, we'll see how that works out. All right, so let me you guys can see this. Is it fairly large?
Yes, sir.
If I turn off my
Yes.
camera, would it just give you all some more space?
We love your background. Don't.
Yeah, background
Every
is
day saying
fine.
a different things in a
Yeah.
travel.
Everybody's seeing what? Okay, so that's an infinity. Oh, you're talking about that? Look, oh yeah, it is. All right, so let's go back to the presentation and start from here. All right, so again, this is the beginning of the textbook. It's the main textbook that we're going to be utilizing, which is the Exploring Leadership text by a couple of the authors. But before we went into that, we started by looking at the course description, and as it says here, it's an introductory course. So, in essence, therefore, it's not meant to be any sort of course that is going to be what do you call it? Exceptionally in-depth leadership course. It's the idea is to begin the process of you getting into the whole concept of the study of leadership, and in this case, leadership and ethics, and well, some aspects of governance as well too. It will focus on our experience with the course and our experience that we've already had with leadership and the development of ethical leadership and our understanding of ethical leadership through the process of self-analysis. And so we're going to spend a lot of time doing a lot of self-analysis here. Let me get a pointer that should help with that. So we're going to spend some time with a lot of self-analysis here. There's a lot of personal activities where you are going to be spending a good bit of time evaluating your own personal belief structures and value systems. And then, of course, we're going to be looking at ethical decision making and its practical application to things around you. Now, these are all standard, comprehend and thing. But what I want to point to is particularly the last one, display and modify behaviors indicative of personal philosophies of positive leadership and ethics. Now, when we say modify behaviors, for those of you who have done some sort of sociological studies or psychological studies, you'd realize that behavior modification is probably one of the most difficult things to achieve in individuals. There have been various attempts at behavior modification. Anybody can think of how some of your behaviors have been modified over time? What took place to modify your behavior over time? How did your parents modify your behavior? Guys, this is not a class with me talking and you listening. These are classes with us discussing things.
Could it be the environment you grew up in?
Yes, but what in the environment would help you to modify your behavior? Let's say your parents come across some behavior that you're doing that they don't like and they want to modify it. What was their strategies to modify your
Yes,
behavior?
punishment and rewards.
Punishment.
Licks.
Right, licks, katas, eh?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. Plenty of that for some of us.
Yes, sir. You take some people all the way back there, sir.
Yeah.
Or they
But-
will ban you from certain things, like the stuff that you really like.
Yeah, I was now about to say that, like they would take away your cell phone, or you can't go out for 2 weeks or some kind of thing like that.
Grounding you and that kind of stuff.
Unfortunately.
Yes, sir. Some people used
And
to
my
have curfew
parents were-
before the lockdown.
My parents were bad, like they did it kind of last minute with bad mind in it. So like you there thinking that you're going somewhere, and then they're like, "Oh no, you're banned because you did X, Y, and Z," and now you're like, "What?" Yeah, they were really bad mind like that.
Well, back in my days, it used to be licks and that. So you get serious punishment and a whole set of banning for a good long while. And you ever, what about in school? What behavior modification techniques were utilized in school?
There would be two.
Sorry?
Detention.
Detention.
Penmanship, which I
Lying.
And like,
Lying.
In
So,
St. Anthony's, if you give trouble, they used to make you walk around the field with a chair on your head.
Right?
Yeah, brutal.
What?
Yeah. In the hot sun.
No.
What school was that?
The chair was for shade, or the chair
St.
was for
Anthony's.
shade?
No, it's a metal chair. I not shading with no metal chair in the hot sun. I go fry my friend.
Very good.
I
very
mean, my school, that make my school punishment look like not even a punishment. My school punishment was like they'll put you on a bench to sit down for the whole day.
Future special. All right. That's like the dancing chair, basically.
Yeah.
So in essence, what they were using there was a technique called public shaming. Of course, back in my days, it was a little more brutal because you used to get licks in school. We used to get beaten with a piece of Purple Heart stick. So the deans would come around, and if it was not too, the degree of what was it? The degree of seriousness was determined by the number of strokes you received. So if it wasn't too bad, you could get 1 stroke. If it was you get 2 strokes. If it started to border on, you need a little more, you get 4. And then there was a special one. You used to get 6 of the best, and a note will be put onto your file that will permanently blemish your file that you received 6 strokes for some sort of behavior that was
what school you went?
Holy Cross College. Hold a second. You what?
The heat gun?
No. Yes, Holy Cross College. Up on the hill there, they used to already. But you see, guys, you have to remember, this is before they banned corporal punishment in schools. And
Yes, sir. The ban corporal punishment when I was like in standard 2 or something.
Right. Well, that was your days. My days, it was blows all the way up to Form 5. And worse yet, if it was Form 6, well, they used to take it to the station and hand you over to the police if you did something worthy of that punishment. But so our course here wants you to modify behaviors. Do you think we could use those kind of techniques of punishment and taking away some sort of taking away privileges that you have? You think that will work in our case here?
Well, so there's kind of two ways to modify behavioral changes, and it's either by rewards or punishment. Even though so you can reward good behavior or punish bad behavior. But punishment just kind of work better, as apparently study shows.
Well, some people
But
would not agree with you.
Well, no, I mean, like I did the psychology class now, and they just say that people would rather not do bad things if they know they will lose or it will affect them negatively.
Right. So
rather
positive
than the
reinforcement.
reward.
Positive
Yeah.
reinforcement, right? Okay. But what is probably the most, I mean, for those of you who have done some studies, what do you think is probably the most effective manner of modifying behavior? Having something outside of you tell you you must behave this way, or something that is internal to you that inspires you to be able to behave in that particular manner?
Internal.
Internal.
Because then you have some sort of a purpose for it. You have some sort of a passion for not doing something, as opposed to
doing something.
Or doing something, as opposed to somebody just coming to you and letting you know what you have to do. You feel like you're being taken control over.
Right. So it means, therefore, that one of the objectives of this course is to get you to want to modify your own personal behavior through some form of inspiration or some form of or technique that will inspire you to want to modify your behavior if required. Because some of you may already have these behaviors already indicative in your personality. So, but we'll see how we move forward as we start to move through and you start to develop, okay, what is this course about, and how do I kind of work with it? All right. But as I said before, from the course objectives, this is probably the most what's word I want to use? I want to use the word the most lofty of ideals or objectives that a course can actually speak to. So therefore, there's a chance that the behaviors that we're talking about will not occur within the realm of this class, though we hope that it would take place, but that it will have a long-term impact on you throughout your behaviors moving forward in the future. So we may not actually see the behavior modification immediately, but we may be able to see it over time. That makes sense? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
sir.
All right, so again, we talked about the Exploring Leadership. That's the main text that we're going to be using by Kumaev, Lucas, and Mahon. This is a 1998. There is a newer version, but the version that I have available on the classroom is the 1998 version. And we're also using excerpts from the Leadership and the Leadership Experience by Daft from 2008. Again, there are later editions, but the versions that I have are the older ones, so we'll stick to those for now. If you do have access to the newer ones, you should see some updates, but primarily the updates to most of the textbooks, there will probably be more of the examples or the way in which they ordered certain things in the textbook. And as I said before, the Exploring Leadership, there are, in fact, YouTube recordings, sort of like audiobooks, for those people who not too interested in reading, but they be willing to listen to an audio text, while they do other things, multitasking, as some people talked about. So those are the textbooks that we're looking at. So we start off the unit by looking at leadership in the modern construct. So the first thing about it is that in the 21st century, which was the last millennium, the question of leaders being born and not made is one that challenged a point of view that was accepted, because for a very long time the belief was that leaders were born, and this text is going to be saying to you that no, leaders aren't born, we can make leaders. In fact, later on, for the debate exercise, you should be looking at that particular issue of born leaders as opposed to made leaders. Um, and that question is still one that a lot of people have a very colloquial view about leadership and whether or not you're born to leadership or not. Specifically, we'd like to look at leadership in our own local and regional context, but we can't help but look through the lenses of international environments, because to we have to look at it kind of top down. We don't have a lot of textbooks that are available for us to utilize to look at leadership from the Caribbean perspective only. So we have to look at it from an international perspective and then bring to bear the relevant elements to um, our particular context. And one of the things that I found when I do this is that I'm in looking at this model of leadership and looking at the leadership around me within the various organizations, sometimes it leaves a very big gap between what I'd like to see and what actually exists. And I'd leave that up to you in terms of how you feel about the leadership around us at this point in time. All right, so leadership defined in the text is defined as a relational, ethical process of people working together to attempt to accomplish positive change. Now, we're qualifying this thing here because, first of all, we're saying it's a relational activity, which means leadership is not something that's done in isolation, it's done with other people. It's ethical in that the behavior of the leader and the followers is going to be one that is governed by a set of commonly accepted values and rules that we all agree guides our behavior. And that has to do with the ethical behavior of individuals, both as followers and as leaders. And we are going to be focusing our attention on accomplishing positive change. Now, that's not to say that leaders don't engage in negative activities. We have that as well. I mean, how did you learn to cuss? Or did you teach other people how to swear?
You might
Ask-
hear it
ask-
with
Huh?
you might hear it with your parents, sometimes even songs, and you just it flies out, I guess.
Yeah. And when you started to understand what cussing was about?
When you see people's reaction, or like the context in which it was used.
Right? But where was some? I know for me, I heard my father swearing, especially when he drove. He used to get annoyed with people driving, and as a result of this day, when people drive, I used to be cussing like that. Alert behavior, right? We could understand that as alert behavior.
Yes, definitely.
All right, but the true, I mean, there's no way I could have done all the swearing around my dad. But the true nature of swearing and some of our behavior, we learn from other people. And it's not necessarily going to be a good thing, but we did learn and we were led into some of these activities by the folks that we were around. So, I mean, the people who taught me to cuss is my friends at school. I mean, some of the worst words I probably learned at school. Some of the worst things.
That's where I was gonna say the same as well. Like when I started Form 1, that's when I was hearing cussing all the time, all from my
Yeah.
colleagues.
Yep. I actually came from a Catholic school into another Catholic school and came across this swearing only at that point in time. Especially some of the references that were being made. I mean, that is something that I did come across at school. So therefore, sometimes the leadership that we, or the relational leadership that we're looking at, is not necessarily centered around positive change, but it could be something that people could look at being negative. So therefore, it's of questionable ethical values. So those are things that we know are happen, but the leadership model that we're going to be looking at is developing our ability to act on positive things in an ethical manner with other people. That's why we define leadership as relational. So the focus there is about leadership is about the quality of the relationships we develop in our thing. So leadership can be looked at from various frames or frame of references. So the political sciences. So when we talk about political science, we're talking about power and influence. This is about how we are how we acquire power and how we use that power to influence the behavior of other people. So when we see people like this, well, this is kind of a little dated, but we know these two individuals.
Yes, sir.
This is the past president of this is 45 as they call him, and the gentleman at the back there is, everybody knows him.
Gentleman, the back is you're talking about Mr. Trump.
No, he's in the foreground. In the background is.
Oh, okay. All right. I think I now get your perspective. He's I want to say, is he the president? I'm not sure if he's president or prime minister of China.
Yes, yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
So the reason why I had this picture is because at the time, these were probably the two most powerful people from an economic perspective. And you'd realize that they arrived at power from various methods. So Donald Trump arrived at power through popular vote, whereas the premier of China, he arrived there through support through the system of the communist system that they have running in China. And of course, how they use their power and how they influence people is going to be very interesting. So we could supplant President Trump with President Biden. Both positions carry with them lots of power. So it's not really a matter of who's there at the top, but how they use their power that we're going to be measuring what's going on. So this is Trump again with another leader, not necessarily of a positive nature, but you all should be familiar with this gentleman.
Kim?
Yes. Very problematic man.
Very, yeah. Very weird situation there in North Korea. So, and a dangerous one because of the imminent threat that they pose to each other. And this was during a period when they were trying to kind of get some sort of dialogue going between the two sides to be able to kind of iron out some of the problems that North Korea has with the rest of the world. And if you look back at history, North Korea is a product of U.S. involvement in the Middle East. And Russia is at the background of this behavior as well, because that is kind of like a foothold in that peninsula. If you look at where they're located in terms of their geopolitical position, which is one of the reasons why everybody treats that country with kid gloves, because they also have access to nuclear power. So that is a dangerous thing when you have what you could see as psychotic individuals controlling things like nuclear arms. Then we have this element. Now, there was recently a newer version to this that took place, but again, this is a G7 summit. You're familiar with this G7? G7, G8, G9, G10, you have different terms that are utilized here, but each of these are the leaders of various countries that are economically powerful in the world. So, of course, yes, you'd have the United States. This lady here is up for re-elections right now. That's Merkel. You'll recognize her, Angela Merkel. It's a very different individual.
No, sir.
All right, this is Trudeau from Canada. This gentleman here, I believe, is from France. This person here is from England. That was before we have the current Mr. Johnson. This gentleman here is from Japan. This gentleman here is from Italy. I think Spain is somewhere here, and I think I'm not sure who this guy. He might be Spain as well. But each one represents a powerful economic country, the most powerful economies in the world, meeting to determine directions and making agreements with each other that assist with trade, with climate control, and other types of activities that are of global importance around the world. Again, this is about the political aspect because all of these people represent power in its rawest sense and most powerful sense. But if we look at political power, who can we identify as having power in our own country? So we have political power emerging with the parties in existence, not so? And in our circumstance, people end up in power based upon popular elections, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right? So I mean, I know some we generally tend to shy away from discussing people's political persuasions and stuff like that. But this class is going to ask you to start to kind of examine a little bit in more detail the kind of things that we might want to shove under the table and be kind of pussyfooting around a little bit. But we're going to be looking at those things, and part of the thing is to understand the reason why we have to look at it is because we need to understand that power and influence and political power is just one of the aspects that leadership can be looked at. The next one is under management, and management really looks to effectiveness of managers or supervisors in their relationship with subordinates. So unless any of you all in class here right now are a manager, most of us have acted or behaved or worked in a situation where we are subordinate to somebody else. And that subordinate situation is really looking not at your personal benefit, but at how best to get you to do the things that the organization needs to get the maximum profitability out of it. Isn't that the case that goes on? Look for the maximum. They have different names for it, but the idea is they're looking for the most amount out of us that they can get at the least cost. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
One person. Anybody here works in situations like that?
Well, going back to what I used to do when I said I performed spoken word, when I usually say my price, what I think I'm worth, usually these people see it as just a little thing on the side because to be honest in our country people who do performing arts and stuff even though it's an occupation for us in this field other people don't take it as something that you could actually make a living out of. Like I remember my form teacher, she told me when I said I wanted to be an actor involved in art, she told me I have to be realistic. So I've been in that situation a lot of times in the past. It's draining, but once you're outspoken and you know what you're worth, you can't really let people put a price on you once you know what your price is.
Yeah, but will they be willing to pay the price that you asked? That's the
Yep,
question.
they usually ended up giving in, but maybe that's just me being lucky, but I can see how it wouldn't be that way for everyone else.
Yeah. But what we talk about here is we're talking not so much in the performing arts because the performing arts is a lot is based upon your popularity and and how effective you are in bringing audiences to the venue. That determines the kind of price you can quote. So the here we're talking about run of the mill management type of activities, business places that are running that have managers that are trying to get the most out of their employees to be able to get the revenue that they're looking for from day to day. So some examples of that would be this gentleman here. I should know him. He passed away, but his legacy lives on in Apple, and he was actually not known to be a very nice. Any of y'all looked at that movie that depicted his life?
Jobs
No,
movie.
I saw clippings of it.
Yeah, he wasn't a very nice person to work with. In fact, he was known to be very critical of employees. He, in fact, at one point in time, was rumored to have called the help desk and wasn't happy with the results, and then went to the department and kind of got people fired everybody. So he did those kind of things because he wanted the best, and because he wanted the best, then he wouldn't put up with mediocrity, and that kind of didn't mean that it worked well for people around him because he insisted upon perfection at all times. So I know it was very difficult to work around him.
I
This
guess
gentleman,
he would have like an unrealistic expectation of people if that's how he's judging them based on.
yeah, but he did have very high expectations, and when they weren't thinking, it's one of the reasons why they say that he was so depressed a lot, and he was very unhappy because remember he did at the end of the day, if you look at the movie, you'd see that his life was kind of he was estranged from his wife and his children because of that type of activities. This gentleman here, Mark Zuckerberg, is now in a lot of problems right now because of the current issues and ongoing issues with Facebook and data mining and sharing data in the States, much less data around the world. So again, if you ever looked at the film Social Networking, you'd start to understand that working for somebody like him was not going to be an easy thing as well. As opposed to maybe, well, this guy is also under a lot of heavy criticism now, given that
All the rich people under a lot of criticism, I said.
yeah, there are now a lot of criticism because all of them seem to have gotten there by taking advantage of a lot of people and not necessarily being the kind of individual that they say they are. This is part of the problem. So though they from a management perspective they were very successful, what was the experience of working with individuals like this? And that's something that we have to pay attention to. Another method or another frame that we look at leadership is through anthropology, and that is actually through looking at our cultural influences, our symbols and norms in societies as they've developed during time. Now, anthropology is one where we kind of look backwards a little bit. So when we look back in the past, part of the issues that come up with leadership is really going to be based upon lineage. So the only way you could have gotten into a position of power was to be born into it. You following? So if you look back in history, a lot of the leaders that existed at that time, a lot of them, for many people, had to be born into it. Other than that, they would rise into leadership positions because of some form of some strength that they had, be it their might or their ability to kill better than others or their ability to outthink other people. So those are the kind of things that we look at. So our cultures recognized those influences and therefore would represent a point of view that we would hold as these people would naturally be leaders in our organizations. So when we look at anthropology, what we're talking about is language. We're talking about various artifacts, the things we use, the people that were involved, and the type of relationships and culture that developed. So if we look at our own culture here in Trinidad and Tobago, what would you say were things that we inherited from the past that we still hold as important today in terms of leadership?
So you're talking about like the voting system, that kind of thing?
It could be that, yeah. But you don't have to go to elections and stuff like that. Think about leadership in a household. For people who come from religious households, who's the leader in the household? The mom or the
Man
dad?
is the head of the home.
The
That
dad will basically have different religion.
Right. So this is what I'm talking about. the culture develops and can be seen through the religious practices in the society that we're looking at. So when you move from one society to another, the nature of leadership can change. So, for example, in some organized or cultures, I should say, women have a bigger role. So in traditional African societies, women had a bigger role as being leaders in the household, whereas men were expected to go out there and hunt and gather and whatnot. Women were the ones who really ran things, and that's very similar across the board in Eastern cultures. What about how the treatment of old people historically? When we say old people, we talk about older people,
So we treat them with great reverence and respect.
right? Do we do that today?
So
Nope.
yeah, well,
No.
kind
The
of,
vast
maybe not
majority.
as much. Maybe
Right.
as not as much.
Throw them in our home.
Yeah,
So
that's
not
my
as
point.
much as we should.
Right. But the whole point was in societies in the past, from our past, people who lived a long time had a lot to share with us. And therefore, they were looked upon as the elders who would help us to understand more of ourselves. So those are things that culturally, from an anthropological point of view, determine the nature of leadership within our societies. And they vary depending upon, I would say, the degree of modernization. So, for example, a lot of us, as we grow up, we look at the people around us and we say the older they are, the more out of touch they are. The world is not the same way it was when you were growing up. We'll tell our parents that, no, and our grandparents.
Well, so I think in connection to the question you asked about how we treat elderly people and stuff like that, it stems from a lot, um, as well too, because elderly people says a lot about younger people,
Uh-huh.
and they kind of do the same thing. As a perfect example would have been, they say younger people don't listen, they don't do the right things, they don't do what they're supposed to do, and then COVID came and the elderly people showed the same thing. So, is
Twice a child. That's how it's been.
yeah, yeah. So don't dong on young people. That is probably one of the reasons why they don't really do what they used to do before, or do it as much as they should have done it before.
Mhm.
Because
But what you're
of the way they
talking
bring
about
up.
there, what you're talking about there is current trending. Currently, age is not a respecter of in our society of leadership anymore. What we look for is people's prowess and that type of stuff. And when people do get old, they become marginalized in our society. So as somebody did indicate, we start to put them in homes and that kind of stuff. So they start to lose their prominence in society as potential leaders. And at one point in time, guys, um, if you ever really look at politics is populated by a lot of older people, correct? There's a
Yeah, they
reason.
wouldn't give us a chance. All in the
No, no, there,
workplace
there
and
was a
all.
reason for that, because it was believed, and this. If you go back into Greek anthology and stuff like that, you'd realize that you couldn't take on positions of leadership if you had not lived a life of an experience, because you are apt to make rash decisions due to the fact that you simply did not know what certain outcomes were, which is one of the reasons why back in the day older people would be um, favored for positions of leadership because of the degree of experience that they had and the fact that they were able to survive through those times and arrive at a position like that. But nowadays we don't look at that. Seniority and that type of stuff is not necessarily looked upon as being something that is critical. Let's see who's this. Hello, Miss Webb. Hi, Miss Webb. Are you there? Okay, so eventually she might be able to. You all can let me know if in the chat she's saying anything. Um, because I can't, when I'm presenting, I can't see the the chat. All right, so what I'm looking at here, different anthropological models that we're looking at, values, practices, rituals, that kind of heroes and symbols. That's just one of the methodologies that they look at or utilize in terms of doing anthropological studies. The other one is leadership through history. So, when we look at historical leadership, we're talking about people who acted in key figures acting in significant time frames when there's major social movement. So for example, these guys here were all leaders identified during the last Great War, which is World War II. So you all recognize these people, right?
Yes.
So the one on the farthest right is Stalin. I
Correct,
just
Joseph
asking.
Stalin. Uh-huh.
The third one from the left is Hitler.
Adolf Hitler, correct. Uh-huh. Fellow with
Surprising
the
that
hat.
I guess not the other two is probably good guys and we don't really know the name.
You don't know the name. So the guy with the bowler hat here, that's Winston Churchill, and this guy here was Roosevelt.
Yes, sir. You know, for some reason I was thinking Roosevelt because I just feel like Roosevelt was during that period.
Right. So those were three leaders that rose to prominence during the period of the Great War, which we come to know now as World War II. All right. There are other leaders that emerged out of it, but these were the ones that were at the forefront of everything. What about this gentleman? How many of you all recognize him?
Martin Luther King.
All right. He rose to prominence
Had a
during
dream.
which movement? Civil
I
rights.
know
The one
this.
about Black Lives or something?
Yeah, civil
Black
rights,
lives
civil rights.
this is before Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
This is the
This was
civil
more.
rights
I was
movement.
just joking.
Civil rights movement. No, but he's part of that history. The Black Lives Matter movement comes out of the civil rights movement out of the
It's like
50s
a
and
branch.
60s. All right. This gentleman here is also related to that civil rights movement as well. You all know this guy? Well, his name is right behind him there, Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael. Do you know his current name?
No?
No, sir.
No?
I wasn't even aware he was. I never aware of him, so I didn't know he was like.
Okay. You know he's a Trinidadian?
No.
Okay. Kwame Ture. Sounds familiar?
Sorry?
Kwame Ture.
Kwame Ture. No, sir. I kind of lost.
No, sir.
I was only
Okay.
19, sir.
Well, I mean, he was actually related to the Black Panthers movement, and he was also related in Trinidad to the Black
I
Power
was
movement.
no going to say that, you know.
Right. So history is part of the thing of where leadership comes up. The Black Power movement in Trinidad and Tobago, he was active during that period in Trinidad and Tobago, but he started his stuff in university abroad. If you want to learn a little bit about him, if any of you are familiar with the film The Black Klansman,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, a recent film, I think last year or year before it came out. You can look at that. Part of the story is about Stokely Carmichael, all right, or Kwame Ture. So you could come across him in that film. It's kind of mentioned in that behavior because they were trying to assassinate him during that period. That was
But
where.
so you're saying that he's still alive?
Yeah, well, I think he's still alive, yeah, today. He's a much older gentleman now, so he wouldn't look anything like this. I think he's still alive, and I hope he is. Not familiar if he died at any point in time, but you can check it out on Google and see if he's still around. All right, this gentleman passed away. We know him, and the movement he was involved in was apartheid. You all familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's Nelson, right? Nelson Mandela. All right. So we understand, therefore, these are people. Can you think of any other leaders in other social movements? So let's look at, like, for example, the current Black Lives Matters. The people who seem to be iconic with that movement are the people who were killed. So the first gentleman that that we could think of when you think of Black Lives Matter is who?
George Floyd.
Right.
George
And why
Floyd.
is that? Because a lot of the activities were centered around his behavior and what happened to him. But have there been leaders that have emerged to move that argument forward, or has it just been more social movement altogether?
I think one of Martin Luther King's daughter or something of the sort has emerged as well too.
Right. Okay.
But yes, it was more of a social. It didn't really like have a leader at the forefront.
Right. So there wasn't
It was
anybody
more
at a focal point.
just
But isn't that something of how things are done now in terms of how leadership kind of works now? It's more group leadership activities. It's us moving together, moving forward. So there's always already that kind of transition moving forward there. But you would see some leadership moving and coming to the fore at various times. But that idea of one individual representing the entire movement is problematic. So you'd want to be looking at things like that. All right, so let's look at another area. You all are familiar with this in terms of psychology and sociology. And they're either going to be looking at how individuals act or how we behave in groups. And that group or individual behavior falls into the study of psychology and sociology. So let's look at the behavior of the boss on the left as opposed to the behavior of the boss on the right. Which one would you say you would prefer to work with?
On the
one
right.
on your right.
Leader.
Choose them.
Right?
So the leader.
Why?
Because he tries to, from what I'm seeing, just from the picture, he tries to build that knowledge within you to help you understand that he's not someone to fully take over you and your group. He is more so of for lack of better wording, a servant than a leader. He's there for your well-being, and he has more so of an empathy. That's why everybody is working together to bring up that business, as opposed to the person on the left who just looks like he, wants his money and you got to work to do it.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, you familiar with any of these guys?
So yes, sir. Like that. The one to the furthest left is my personal Google profile right now. It's been like that for like 4 years.
On the
That's
left?
Sigmund Freud on the left. Sigmund Freud. That exact picture is my personal Gmail profile picture.
Right. Good.
So I remember Sigmund Freud while doing a psychology, so a psych class. So I can't remember exactly what it was like. It was a lot. It was a lot to think.
Human social diversity, I believe.
Yes.
Mistaken.
Right. So he actually is the kind of grandfather of modern psychology, and especially the concept of treating individuals through dialogue and intervention that way, as opposed to through some of the intervention that was taking place via medication and electric shock techniques and that kind of stuff that was also predominantly utilized for the management of people with psychoses. Of course, he was kind of like the godfather of modern psychology. What about the gentleman in the middle? Anybody familiar with him?
So he looked like a Carl.
Carl who?
I forget your last name right now, sir.
Mark or something.
Karl Marx or something.
Yeah. What's Karl Marx? Karl Marx is a sociologist. What was he known for?
So, Marxism. But let me see if I can describe it for you. I think I'll get it.
I was gonna say his hair. Was he known?
I'm questioning. Are he believe in working together, or is he, or does he believe in segregation and so forth? I believe he
He
believes in
developed
working
the whole
together.
concept of communism, right?
Yeah,
um,
I was going to
and
say, yeah, I
socialism,
feel like
right? So he
communism.
was studying about the nature of getting people to work together for common good, as opposed to putting the self before the others. You put others before self. So he was the protagonist for that. Of course, the whole concept was diluted and manipulated by the political leaders around him. But he was a Karl Marx was a populist concept. So you have to kind of look at that from that. And this gentleman at the very end here,
Yeah, well, like,
nobody?
nah, he does seem familiar to me.
All right. So you might know him unless you've done some specific psychology studies. He's B.F. Skinner. Does his name sound familiar now?
Oh yeah, yeah, it does sound familiar now. But again, I can't say what
Why? Okay, so
was.
he is actually a behavioralist who spent a lot of time developing um, educational psychology. And in particular, he spent a lot of time developing concepts and ideas around something called andragogy, which is adult education. So, and what we're going to find is that in this program, this model, we're going to be looking at a lot of behavioral sciences in relation to this, to the development of this model. So, again, psychology and sociology looks at leadership either as individuals rising or having particular kinds of traits, or sociology as the way in which our societies generate leadership. All right, and these theories that we're going to be looking at, they emerge out of a lot of the work that these three gentlemen here worked on. All right, so the question that you need to ask yourself is the area that you either study or the way where you work, how do they approach leadership? So some of you all are in journalism, some of you all are in management, some of you all are in various fields. How does your field of study approach leadership? Let's hear somebody from journalism or media studies. Are you all there still?
Yes, sir, but I work
Yes,
in
sir,
the
but
field.
Uh-huh. Nobody with media in the media here. All right. So what field you work in?
Graphic design.
What's that?
I do graphic design, so
All right. So talk to me about graphic design, show.
the only thing I could think about in terms of leadership is in terms of dealing with a client who doesn't exactly know what they want. Um, and you probably have to spearhead the majority of the project and, give them your insight. That's that's the most I could think of.
All right. But what about the organizations that you work in
Hmm.
that are of a graphic nature? Is it not traditional management structure?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that. Yeah, traditional.
Yeah. So, but your discipline of graphic arts, if we go outside the business, who are considered leaders in graphic arts then? Graphic art designs.
So if you permit me to speak, I could add for the media. I could add to the media field.
Yeah, go ahead.
In masscom, it consists of PR, advertising, journalism, and so on. So a leader in my field would be someone who um, commands crowds, um, makes good use of social media, has a good work and personal life balance, and they're able to keep personal stuff personal. Um, they have a good public appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And for the PR aspect, more like being able to mitigate or control situations that are
Right. So what you're talking about there is a managed image approach.
correct.
All right. So that could be dangerous, right? Doesn't necessarily lend itself to truthfulness. Yeah, remember that, huh? All right. And what other disciplines we have here? We have IT guys in class here.
Yes, sir.
All right. So talk to me about
Well,
leadership in the IT environment. Now the IT
well,
environment is very wide, but
yeah. I mean, I could tell a little bit about my personal experience. I work with a really small, close knitted IT company, and really how it works is that well, my boss is a kind. I would like to say he's a kind of visionary kind of thing. Where yeah, he would kind of coach us through stuff on any ideas on new stuff that he want to implement in the future, or thinking about. He'll always run it by us and stuff.
Mhm.
So it's a kind of open kind of thing. It's not really strict. He's not like a boss. He's more like, to me, I would consider him kind of like, and that based on the graphic that he get was
right. So
kind
it's more
of
like a
leader.
coach. Then. He's kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
getting everybody together to work on this
yeah,
thing together. All right.
yeah. And really open with all the new ideas and
Okay.
possible
Um,
strategies.
who else would like to share in terms of what their area of work or study has to do in terms of how they view leadership, at least from what you can perceive by being involved in it? Are there
Um,
any? Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
I study in management and entrepreneurship, and I
Mhm.
think leadership will more fall into like how well it could encourage persons, like for them to be better and still have the productivity level, a high productivity level.
Right. So you're looking at the management type
Yeah.
uh, field, right? Okay, that makes sense. And then we'd see that there's behavioral issues related to that. What else? Anybody else in any other field?
Coming back to advertising, I
Right.
think that a really important thing is when your leader tells you the more ethical purpose of your ads. Um, so, for example, rather than just trying to get people to come up with ideas that will make money and profit, you want to tell people or try to motivate people to come up with ideas that are going to inspire your target market rather, or get them to purchase your product because of some value and belief that they can now connect with, um, rather than advertising something that's not necessarily true, and influencing the customers lack of knowledge on in that area, you know.
That's actually true because unfortunately, marketing and advertising have generated some very bad. Um, they have a bad reputation. Let's put it that way. Then, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, especially this guy, the head marketing officer for Coke, Manuel Arroyo. I mean,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so he makes, I feel as though, of course, I don't know the whole 180, but I feel as though he encourages them to lean more towards people's imagination, you know, and encourage them to purchase the product based on a character that the product has, as opposed to letting them know that it is at the end of the day just a product that is full of sugar and will, I mean, obviously you can't sell the product that way if you were to advertise it like that, but at the same time, I kind of disagree with selling it to people as if it is something that it really isn't.
True. That's like their water.
Yeah.
Their water is not really water, it's saline solution. Which is why when you drink it, you get more thirsty.
Yeah.
Because
And it
it's,
encourages you to get more of the same product.
yeah, it engineers you to drink more of it, and you still end up with too much salt in your system. Miss Pear, you wanted to say something? I saw your microphone coming on.
Oh no, sir. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I'm just trying to encourage people to participate. All right.
I'm listening right now. I know I was participating earlier on.
Okay. All right. Let me get back to the presentation now. Guess I have to start back presenting, and we'll pick back up from there. All right. So the different. So for example, in my case, in education and in teaching, leadership actually has to do more from a traditional point of view. It has to do with a combination of qualifications and experience, because you can be as qualified as you can be the most qualified person, but if you've never worked out how to teach somebody and gone through the process, you really don't get the idea of how to go about teaching. And that is a challenge that a lot of people find, especially students. Students will come across lecturers who are very, very knowledgeable about their product or their discipline, but they just, for the life of them, they cannot transfer their learning to yours, and they can't bring you along. And a lot of times I've found that two things go to that. Sometimes if if somebody didn't struggle a little bit with a subject matter, they don't really appreciate how much it hurts students when they have to struggle. This is in particular with mathematics, so that you find you have these really strong mathematics people, but when they try to teach people mathematics, they don't break it down in a way that people can follow, and that causes problems for people, for students generally, to understand it. And that is one of the challenges that you face as a teacher. As a teacher, your ability to break things down and make it more understandable to your audience, and you have to understand your audience as well, is the challenge that you face. It's not the material itself, but the challenge of getting that material to the students and them getting some value out of it is the other aspect that you have to look at. So, I mean, in terms of leadership, what we find happening is that a lot of us teachers, we look at people with more teaching experience to give us ideas. We also look to innovators in the field to see, hey, what did they do and how did they try to do it, and that kind of stuff, and try to inculcate that in our behavior, our study as well. All right, so let's. This here was a quotation that I utilized about superficial leadership, and you could look at this in relation to this photograph here. I don't know if you all remember the context of this photograph. This photograph was taken.
Yes, G7 summit.
Yeah, it was at the last G8 summit that he was at, when he refused, when he took the US off the Kyoto Convention. So he removed the US support for the Kyoto Convention on climate change, because he's an individual who's anti-climate. Let's see. Hi, Nadia. Hi, Nadia. Hello. Okay, it's in this infinity thing. Hi, Nadia. Can you get your microphone up? All right, let me get this going. So maybe she can. Hi, Nadia.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Well,
Hi, welcome.
good night.
Good night. I know you joined late. I'd like to talk to you after class. Okay.
No problem.
All right. So this gentleman here had taken look at the way in which everybody sort of like around him and look at his behavior here. And this quotation that I have here reminds me of this situation here. The superficial leader cannot see how things happen, even though the evidence is everywhere. The leader is swept up by the drama, the sensation, the excitement, and all this confusion is blinding. But the leader who returns again and again to awareness of process has a deep sense of how things happen. And this is true. This is about the importance of reflection. If we look at processes and we keep on reviewing them and we pay attention to the details, we will make better leaders, not only for other people but for ourselves in terms of making good decisions. That's why I brought this picture up, because you can see that look on his face, his body language is showing he's locked himself off from everybody. He's not listening, and they're leaning in, trying to convince him to make a different decision. And eventually, what they had to do is to make their decisions without the United States, and that actually was one of the things that Biden had to kind of undo when he got back into when he got into power, to back into power, but because those things were critical and important for him. All right, so what we want to start to look at here now is the framework that we're going to be looking at, and we'll go into more details in the other chapters that I'm going to be doing next week and the week following. So the relational leadership model is based upon the psychological and educational framework that we spoke about with B.F. Skinner, Karl Marx, and Sigmund Freud. Now, from the beginning there, because I'm calling those three names, anybody has a problem with socialism right now? When you hear the term socialism,
which is communism, right?
No, communism and socialism are two different things. But
Okay.
if most people view communism and socialism as negative things, especially if you're somebody who's very capitalist prone. So one of the things I want you all to start to do is to start to kind of disassociate yourself from that negative thinking about what socialism is. Understand what it means before you start to make some sort of judgment, because a lot of the judgment that a lot of people develop over socialism is based from primarily a great deal of ignorance. All right. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that we understand that we have our own biases, which brings us to the very first thing that we're looking at here. In order for us to really understand our own leadership potential, we have to start by learning about ourselves. And in order to do that, we have to put ourselves under some serious analysis, which is one of the assignments that you have to do. You have to write a self-analysis, and that is due down at the end of the semester. And we also need to know how other people perceive us. That is self-awareness in the context of others. Because we may think of ourselves in one way, but other people see us in something totally different. And therein, what we need to find is what is the overlap of our situation. Then, of course, we have to understand our own personal values, beliefs, and commitments. Now, those are things that we're going to have to get a good grip of, or else we're going to have problems with this leadership model. This is why the first couple of chapters that deal with this course focus our attention on self-analysis for ourselves, understanding self, understanding others, and how others understand us, and then looking at in a lot of details our ethical values and belief structures. And most times when you're talking about that, what you're talking about is, what we think is wrong and right, and therein lies some serious problems, because that becomes problematic. The model we're going to look at to develop our leadership requires, as we said, self-awareness, and we talked a lot about that, effective listening, collaboration, compromise, and practice. Now we already spoke about self-awareness. We understand what that is. What do you all think effective listening is? Communication, folks. Anybody doing mass comm? How is effective listening defined in the context of communications?
So I think it's about being able to understand like what somebody's saying, and not just automatically assume that they're disagreeing with you, but try to understand the points that they're making, and if it's logical, and if it could affect your point or your ideology.
Well, actually, I was looking for was a definition, if you have it. But is there any mass communication persons in this class?
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
Effective listening basically be it's a technique of observation, not only of verbal cues but non-verbal cues as well. You also have to take into fact feedback within everything that's happening. It's used in counseling, training, and solving problem solving, critiques, etc.
Okay. And what's probably the most critical thing that we have to do when we try to effectively listen?
I don't have like a specific definition, but I would say to listen to understand rather than listening to respond.
Right? That's one technique.
To
But
pay
one of the things
attention.
that we have to do is we have to turn off or
The noise.
down what noise? Noise is interference, but the one specific thing that we need to turn off is judgment. You understand that?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
hmm Because if we listen with our own sense of what is right and wrong, we will not hear. So this no, it sounds easy, but it's not, because it's easy if you're listening to somebody who's speaking to you about something that you already agree with. Yes? But suppose you're talking to somebody and they're speaking to you about something that you are absolutely and totally against. What happens is your own terms of reference begins to cause you to shut down your listening. And that is the part that effective listening requires, that we turn off our judgment. We have to turn off our self-assess, our sense of judgment off
Yes,
of.
sir. And have like an open mind. Is that what
Correct.
you say? Yeah.
And that requires the last thing here. That requires a lot of practice, because one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to listen with our own sense of self-reference. So what we like and what we desire is what we would like to listen to. So I used to run an exercise in class whenever I did effective listening, and I would bring different types of music and I'll play it in the classroom with messages in it, and I'll get people to listen. And once they liked the music, they would get the message. But from the time they listened to any form of music that they did not like, they did not hear the messages inside it. And that was to illustrate to them that once you have an emotive response or some sort of barrier to that particular mode of delivery, we're going to stop listening. And that is what that practice is about. The practice is to listen to things you don't like and try and understand what that person is trying to say. And that is probably the most difficult thing, because you're right. Effective communication requires mutual understanding. You must try to understand what that person is trying to say, that person's position, that person's point of view, not your position of their point of view, but that person's point of view. I'm not saying that you can't have your own position on it, but in order to understand that person, you need to understand where they are coming from and why they are saying what they're saying, why they're thinking what they're thinking, and why they feel the way they feel. All right. So it's being empathic. So those are kind of things. Now, if we can get past that, then it leads into collaboration compromise quite easily, because in order to collaborate, we have to be able to effectively communicate with each other. And that requires some degree of compromise. But a lot of people view compromise as what? A weakness, not so?
Yes, sir.
Why? Why do we see compromise as being weak?
Because it come like to some people it comes like you're giving up on what it is you strongly believed in initially.
Right. And why do we come to the table thinking that my position is the right position?
Um, I
Uh-huh.
guess because I guess because that is what you believe in. I guess
Right. Yeah.
you
But my point about it is,
personally.
why is it that we're so selfish to think that we are the only ones who could come up with the right answer?
I
But
think too
Because
it's because a lot of
so
persons are not
we could never
open.
be wrong, sir.
sorry.
A lot of persons are not open to other person's views. They have, as
Correct.
you would have said, they have a one-minded or a one way of thinking, my way or no way.
Right. But and that is based upon a degree of selfishness because they are they are they are they are coming to the circumstances there with the total understanding or the belief that my way is the best way and no other way makes sense.
Yes,
But
sir.
but my point of that whole statement or that whole premise is that you can't be right. That can't we have to understand that there's not one way to do anything, all right, and to get things done. And in fact, your view may be partially correct, but partially incorrect. Now, what I'm talking
Exactly,
about,
sir.
what I'm talking about here, guys, requires a lot of work. That's why practice is listed here as part of the whole process. Consider, for example, the way in which you worked in groups in the college. Now, everybody complains that working in groups is probably the worst thing you could ever do in Costa, right? Yes? Come on. We're
I
not
mean,
calling.
I wouldn't say, but a lot of people they say so, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir. Sometimes, sis, sometimes.
yeah, not
Yes,
not
sir.
every experience, but in the vast majority of experience, if given the option to do group work or to do individual work, a lot of people, 9 times out of 10, they prefer to do their own work. Yes? And not depend upon other
Yes,
people to get things
yes, sir.
assignments done. Why
Yes,
is that?
because depending on other persons, number one, you are not sure if they are driven as you are.
Uh-huh.
So the ability to get the amount of progress out of one particular task, the other person may not.
Right. Okay. But my point being is, um, if you don't practice collaborative work, then how are you going to get better at collaborative work if you don't practice it?
Very true.
Right? Which is one of the reasons why almost every course that you do has group work in it. Because we need people to understand that you cannot operate in a silo in any environment. You have to operate in the context of having to work with other people. And leadership development requires, and your own personal development requires, that you start to understand how to work better in groups. And compromise is not a weakness, right? Because you have to remember something. When more than one person looks at a problem, it means that you bring to bear on that more perception than what you could bring, because you are only going to perceive that concept or that problem only from the limited set of experiences and tools that you have available in your mind. But if you allow for other people with other experiences and other points of views to look at the same thing, then you're going to find yourself having and truly listening to what they have to say. See, there's a combination here. Truly listening and understanding what they have to say about it. Then it leads to a richer, better solution. Part of which may be some of what you have to do and some of what the other person might have to do. That's why compromise can lead to better decision making. But if we approach compromise from the point of view that compromise is negative, then we're going to find ourselves in a lot of aggravation. And that is part of the thing. But we're just at the beginning of the process. Let's look at this thing. Foundation principles of leadership. Leadership concerns us all. No matter what you think, how divorced you are from, and these days I'm seeing a lot of online videos with people who are disappearing into the bush and filming their experiences of living off grid and that kind of stuff. Are you all looking at that kind of phenomenon on YouTube and whatnot?
And not on YouTube. I think on Discovery Channel they have a few episodes of Naked and Afraid.
Well, no, I'm
I don't
talking
know if
about.
that is what you're talking about.
But you can check it out on YouTube if you
That's
want.
I just follow them.
Right. But you'd understand, even if you decided to go off on your own, to live in the bush and film yourself and then put it up on YouTube, it really still concerns all of us.
Yeah.
You understand? So I don't know how far or off grid they go in, because they're still posting, they still need power to upload wireless and whatnot, right? That's one thing. That leadership is of concern to everybody, regardless of where you might be. You could be the only person on an island. It still concerns what's happening with everybody. That leadership is viewed and valued differently by everybody. All right. Some people see leadership as critical. Some people would see it as, well, neither here nor there, because it doesn't really affect me as much. But we need to understand that everybody views it and values it differently. Again, it's not static, it's dynamic, it's flexible, and that different settings call for different types of leadership. And that's something that a lot of people um, need to come to grips with, that there's no one style of leadership that works for every situation, and there are different styles that are required for different settings. And the most important one is that leadership can be learned and developed. Um, and this is one that we'll be focusing a lot of attention on, which is one of the reasons why you're doing this course. That leadership is something that you can develop for yourself. All right. In order for us to develop that, we must get to the point where we start to develop the following things. So it requires a commitment to the highest ethical standards and encourage change and social responsibility. Now we'll come back to discuss all of those things. But first thing we're looking at here is critical thinking. What is critical thinking? A lot of people talk about critical thinking, but what is it? What does it mean? What does it mean to you? Let's start from that. Anybody? Nobody has a point of view about what is critical thinking.
So, like asking questions like why, what if, how, when, if something arises.
Right? So thinking critically about it, about something, means to ask questions. Yes, that's one thing. What else do you think it entails?
Analyze. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. To analyze facts about something to form judgment on it.
Say that again.
To analyze facts about something to form judgments on it.
All right, to determine correctness of fit and so on by analyzing the facts related to the situation.
Yes.
All right. Anything else?
So I think it's thinking a little in depth about, like, if it's one particular topic, not just think about the basics of something, but think about it a little more in depth, like to get into it a little more.
All right. So all of those things are part and parcel of critical thinking, right? But ask yourself this question: how many decisions that we make in our lives around us on a regular basis do we employ critical thinking in? That's a huge question. You have to actually sit and think about that, because in a lot of instances we don't really think critically. One of the reasons why we don't think critically is that our education system does not train us to think critically. From the very beginning, when we started to go to school, we were told primarily to shut up and sit down and listen. And if you think something besides what the teacher or what the society says or what our norms and values say we must think, then we are beaten down and made to follow everybody else. Critical thinking involves
Yes,
challenging.
there's laugh at yes.
Sorry? Sorry?
No, I just saying people will laugh at you and think when
That's
you
right.
ask certain
That's
things that
that's
might
part of
be.
the correct. That's one of the methods that is utilized to make us toe the line, which is if you think differently or behave differently, then people will make fun of you. It's one of the ways of publicly shaming somebody into becoming or behaving in a manner that everybody else expects that we should do. But the question is what everybody doing correct? And do we sit and think and say, well, we're doing this way all the time? But is that really making sense? Is there not a better way to do
Efficient.
it? Yeah. Well, not
Yes,
only
exactly.
efficient, but a better way, better in the sense of environmentally better, um, emotionally better, from a use of resource base. Is it more efficient, as you talked about? There are different ways of thinking about doing something better than it was before. Faster is one way, more efficient is one way, more friendly, environmentally friendly, and personally friendly. And those are other ways to think about it. It's not only one framework. And again, to bring all of those frameworks together, we have to be able to bring different people from different perspectives, which is one of the reasons why we do. Did somebody post something in the chat?
Nadia
Yes,
raised her hand.
Nadia. Yes, Nadia. You could go. Nadia, if you have a question, go ahead and ask it, because I can't see the chat bar when I have the presentation up. So you can just go ahead and ask.
No, it's just a thought that I'm having based on what you would have just said.
Uh-huh.
But in order for someone to really think critically based on what you would have just said, that person needs to be a little bit more aware of whatever is the topic or the area that they're supposed to be thinking about.
Yes, that's true. So you cannot think critically unless you know about something. But part of critical thinking is also
To ponder.
yeah. Well, pondering or some people call it ruminating requires having some basic understanding of what it is you're looking at. So yes, that is quite true, Nadia. All right, so let's look at the next item here. So we understand a little bit more about critical thinking, but what about credibility? What does credibility mean to you?
So if the information is reliable or factual, to say the least.
All right, so the information that we're looking at or the individuals that we're looking at need to have credibility, meaning that what they're doing is truthful and believable and correct, factual. All right, not correct.
So
Yeah.
before I move on terms of credibility, you was asking before what defines a leader in the fields that we're in journalism. One of the major things of a journalist is the credibility that they hold, including not only a journalist but a news anchor as well. So you will
Correct.
look at the credibility of them.
Correct. And you'd see that of late, a lot of news broadcasters have run into credibility issues when their behavior in other spheres of life impinge upon their behavior in one. So you start to understand that credibility is not something that can be partitioned into one part of your life. It has to be, you have to be truthful and you have to have high integrity and good ethical behavior across all spectrums. Because if you fall short in a different spectrum, it will reflect badly on another. So credibility, integrity, and high levels of ethical conduct are related to each other. Similarly with authenticity, that has to do with truthfulness. And it's about consistency of behavior throughout the whole process in all aspects of your life or in all aspects of behavior. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. So three basic principles. The knowing. We must know first. We have to know ourselves, how change occurs, how and why others may view things differently than you do. All right. And this part is probably the hardest one to get. Why do people think of things differently to you? That is a critical one.
This.
Sorry? I have to pause here, thinking somebody was trying to say something. All right. So, understanding why people think differently is a very important aspect of understanding other people, because you have to be able to know why people do the things they do. Um, you don't have to agree with what they're doing or what they're thinking, but you have to know why they're thinking that way. Because if you want to change their point of view, you still have to understand why they're thinking that way, so that maybe you can work on getting them to agree with you and your position. That's an important element. The other aspect, all right, so let's look at this in terms of perception. So this is perception there. Let's look at this first picture here. Try and ignore the ones on the other side. I should have split this up into 3 slides. What are you seeing here? Some people may have come
There are
across.
two pictures. One
Sorry?
could be, there are two pictures with that. One could be a younger lady looking away, but another picture could also be an older lady looking down.
All right. So of the people who are looking into this black and white picture, how many people actually see either of those images that this person is talking about? I don't know which name it is.
I barely
I do.
seen any,
I see
but
both.
You see both.
but
right?
Yeah.
I could see probably the younger lady looking back. It looked more like some kind of pixie to me.
Pixie.
But I really don't see the
looking
older
over
lady
her
looking back.
shoulder.
Yeah.
Yes, she's looking over her shoulder, fine. But anybody's not seeing the lady, the young girl looking back, looking over her shoulder.
I don't see the old lady looking down. I see the young lady looking. Yeah.
All right. So let's look. Close your eyes and then kind of take the image out of your mind and then open your eyes, and I'll try and help you find the old lady. All right. You open your eyes now.
Yes, sir.
All right. So you
Yes.
see this part here.
You know, make a difference.
Position. Think about this. This is the cheek of the lady looking back, right? But think about this as the nose of the lady looking down. This here is her mouth, and this is her chin.
Oh yes,
This
I
here
see
is
Oh
now.
my
I see
God.
now.
Wow.
See it?
Yes, I see it.
All
Damn,
right.
she's old
Yeah.
now.
And with the one at the bottom too, it could kind of look like a duck, but it's
Right.
a
All
rabbit.
money. Yes. So this could be the nose,
It's not. It
yes,
looks like a duck.
or this could be the
I'm
back
not
of
sure
the.
why a duck will have at the back of his head.
Well, that's like the folds of the
Somebody
feathers.
wrapped his feathers.
Folds of the correct there. Now the last one up here, this comic strip here is one about perception and how and reality. So check this out. The bittersweet meeting of perception and reality. So both individuals viewing the arrival of one on a raft is saying the same thing. They're saved. So what is the
One gets
reality?
a boat to get off and one family find land.
Uh-huh. Why
To me, it's based on both of their experiences because one has been on the water all the time. So even just seeing a small piece of land to him, he is saved. Whereas the other one is stuck on land for God alone knows how long. So just seeing a way off of the piece of land is, for him, he is saved. So it's all based on the person's experience.
Right.
But they both stranded at the end of the day.
Yeah, but
I both them in the exact same predicament at the end of the day.
right, but the whole
They both. I love this line that Bob Dylan once said in one of his songs. He said they both did feel the same, but they just saw it from a different point of view.
uh-huh. And that's the problem of perception. When somebody's based upon your perception of something, you can both be right about one thing and wrong at the same time.
Yes,
So
sir.
from us looking from outside at these two guys meeting each other, one coming on a dinghy and the other one standing on an island, we can understand the irony of the situation because neither of them are saved. The only thing that's there now is that they have company, and now it's two mouths that can't eat because I ain't seen any more coconuts growing on that piece of land and that kind of stuff. There's no saving here. They're both going to die eventually if they don't get further help. Would you agree with that? But at least they won't be lonely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. At least they have company now.
Yeah, but
they could share the drink of loneliness.
Correct. And starvation. Unless of course the guy with the oar takes the oar and kills the other one and then eats him. That might be a different
Wait,
story.
wait, sir. You take it at a different level.
But that's what happened in certain real situations. People started to eat each other. You all remember the group
The
of
plane crash.
plane crash with in the Andes, but that's not the only one. And that's one that's kind of infamous. They made a film about it, where the guy started to feed and eat members of the team that had died. Fortunately, they sort of had a natural fridge. It was frozen up there, so it wasn't that the meat was spoiling, but they were eating people. Imagine the first time they did that; it must have been horrible. Knowing
But
what
it
it
could even be seen in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So something that one person might view as their weakness, another person might view it as their strength.
correct. And that is one of the things from self-awareness we have to understand. What we think of our strengths can become our weakness, and what we think of our weakness can be a strength as well. So
Yeah, that's why I always tell my friends, make the best of whatever situation they're in, because somebody else might actually want to be in their situation that
that's
they,
quite
they
true.
might feel weaker from.
That's true. The worst that you have may be the best that somebody else might be having. So that is quite true. All right, so let's look at another thing here. The second element of the three basic principles is the being part. You must be ethical, principled, open, caring, and inclusive. Now, we've talked a bit about being ethical. We talked about ethics and principles tend to be related to each other. We'll get into that in more detail. Open, caring, and inclusive. What does that mean to you guys? Open, caring, and inclusive. Because this is the difficult part. Open, caring.
Being vulnerable.
Yes. Of the three there, open, caring, and inclusive, what's the most difficult?
Generally, open might be the most difficult, but for certain people, caring might be the most difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, open to what though?
So I'm not gonna say that, sir. I think caring might be the most difficult because it could be open, like being straightforward. You could just say whatever on your mind and don't care about any repercussions. But caring now gives you a different passageway into somebody mind, I think, for me.
So you have to be open to other perceptions and other points of view. You have to care about those people whose opinions you have to be open to and who you may not necessarily like. And you have to include people and individuals with whom you have to open your mind towards. Now,
So the open there doesn't necessarily mean being vulnerable. It just means being open-minded.
yes.
I would say
Yeah, so
inclusive
being
would
able
be
to
the hardest.
acknowledge.
Sorry, open. Say that again. About the knowledge element.
Mr.
Oh,
Dupton.
no, I was saying, and I think inclusive would be the hardest, the most difficult.
Why?
If you look at, let's say, all the in terms of fighting for equality within women's rights, the LGBTQ plus community, a lot of people in the world are open, and in, let's say, black households, like in the US or even here in Trinidad, you could, if as a parent, you could care about your child so much in the world, you will be open to their experiences, but the fact that they tell you that they are part of this community, it could be hard for you to include them because
Very
if,
perfect
okay,
example.
yeah. So, yep, I think inclusive was the most
Inclusiveness
difficult.
is probably the most difficult because that means you not only have to open your mind to that mindset and empathize and care about people who have that mindset. You have to begin to include them in your own circle of activities and friends and followers and such. And that is the part
So,
that is most difficult. Yes?
so in a way, it seems like inclusive to be inclusive, you kind of have to first be open and be caring.
It's
So I
development,
guess that
yeah?
makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. So
developmental.
it kind of dependent on those two things.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess it really could be the hardest.
Yeah, because if you can't be open, then and a lot of people have problems where their ethical values clash with that openness. So it's almost like, your ethical values about certain behaviors threatens the openness that's required for you to be a good leader. So sometimes ethical values conflict with what's happening around us, and we're going to talk about that when we speak about something called moral dilemmas. All right, so let's look at this gentleman here, being the caring leader. And this is just an example of another person who I think was a better leader because he failed a lot. And, only after a long period of time did he begin to succeed. Because a lot of his businesses failed before he was actually able to get to a point where he was successful. And he made a statement here about having a personality of caring about people is important. You can't be a good leader unless you generally like people. And that is how you bring out the best in them. And that's a very important and salient point that he's making. Because you're open and you care about people, and only when you care about them will they be important. But if you don't care about somebody, then it's not going to be important if they work for you or you're working with them and something happens to them and you don't really care about them. It's like, well, it's just another day. And there are people who run their lives or work that way, that they don't care about you. So if something happens to you, they really don't give a fig. You understand what I'm talking about? Some of you all might get it, but some of you all might have been at the brunt of this, where in an organization, the leadership in your organization really don't care about you. So when something happens to you, they don't really, extend any sort of real empathy or emotion towards you and assistance. So that's how you can have an organization where people die or they leave or they retire and nothing happens. Nobody celebrates their or even takes note of their absence. Interesting. Now, the last of the three principles is the doing principles. So, you be, and then you must act in a responsible manner. Socially responsible, consistent, and congruent as a participant in a community and on your commitments and passions. Now, this doing aspect is one that this part here, consistently and congruently, is really important. What's the difference with consistent and congruent? Why use? Because it sounds almost repetitive, doesn't it? What do you see as being the difference between consistently and congruently?
Yes, so people have to Google and thing, you know. So.
Yeah, I guess maybe. All right, so let me help you. Consistently and congruently. Consistently means that every time a certain situation comes up, your behavior, your response is consistent all the way through. Congruently means that in all aspects of your life, you behave consistently across the board. So you can't be, you can't be, what's the word? What behavior are we talking about? You can't be honest at work only, and when you get home, you're dishonest. Let's put it that way. That is not congruent.
So one deals with a deed and the other deals with a character.
Well, to a point, yes. But consistently means that you are always behaving the same way. So every time an issue comes up, you're consistently treating with it in the same manner, based upon your ethical value. All right. Congruently means that in all aspects, on all facets of your life, you're dealing with it the same way. So it's not because what happens here is basically this. When you're at work, you're behaving in one particular ethical behavior or manner. But when you're home, you do it differently. You understand what I'm talking about? So when you're at work, you might treat women or you might treat people with equity and equality. But when you're home, you're talking down to your wife and you're talking down to your husband and you're talking down to your children. And you're behaving with them as if you treat them as if they're stupid and doted. But when you're at work, you behave that way. I don't know if any of you all ever noted that with some people. When they're at work, they're totally different to when they're home.
No, that's the time some serious pimp slap will have to pass.
Well, you see, now, is that consistent and congruent?
Miss Nadia, you just pimp slap people?
But that's what I'm trying to that's what I'm trying to figure out here now. Do you is that consistent and congruent behavior, Nadia?
No, if it is, you could behave one way in work and then at home behaving another way. You're looking to get slapped.
Right. Okay. So no, I am not condoning any sort of violent behavior because
neither am I.
Yeah, but that's what you're doing. You see what's this?
So I call him Miss Nadia anytime anybody gets in trouble, yeah?
Have children at home.
Me.
Now me
I do.
sounds Nadia again. Now so you have to ask yourself, do you behave consistently and congruently with and around your children? Because they would be the biggest magnifying glass for your behavior across the board. So somebody who pimp slapping people when they I could see a problem there because I know you can't pimp slap nobody at work, right? Nadia, where do you work, by the way?
I work at Guardian Life.
Oh, good Lord. Look where. Look where. Because all this
they really need some insurance by survive.
You think about it. An insurance company is responsible for other people's money. Not theirs. It's not their money. People have invested with them to look after some aspect of their income that they're sacrificing and putting aside so that they can either assure themselves of some payment after a period of time or insure themselves in the event of something happening of some return to other people. So it is other people money that they're dealing with, right? Like get that straight. And here you have somebody who want to what? Pimp slap people when they reach home.
Listen, it is just okay. Don't make it so personal.
You need to be open to her ideology, sir. You need to be
include.
No. Listen, I did not say that I would pimp slap people. I say they need a pimp slap.
Yeah, busy, but who doing the slapping?
They're needing it doesn't mean that I will do it.
Yeah, but you
I'm a
So
loved
you,
one, not a
so you
fighter.
need to do some effective
You
listening right
make
now,
Miss
I
Nadia
suppose.
pimp slap
Effective
you.
listening,
Stop
sir.
that.
so Nadia, just to remind you, there's something you may not be aware of, but the class is being recorded, okay? Nadia?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The class is being recorded. Just be like,
Oh my god.
This is going on YouTube.
and it's only for you guys because it's a private
Oh
class.
my gosh. Thanks for telling me, sir.
Yeah, okay. So we understand the three elements of doing, knowing, being, and doing, right? The slapping aside, we'll deal with that one later, okay? The idea is if you don't behave in a congruent manner and consistently, then you're not doing it right. Let's put it that way. Okay? All right. Let's move forward. So this is interesting that this will come up now. Corporate social responsibility is one of those things that your company, Guardian Life or Guardian
Doesn't fit,
Holdings,
yeah.
has spoken a lot about. Corporate social responsibility means that your organization takes it upon themselves to be responsible to the society that they serve
True.
in more than one way. All right, that their goals are responsible to society, that whatever long-term objectives that they have is socially responsible, that they are truly sincere with their with their with their participants or shareholders as stakeholders, I should say,
And
that they
operations.
yeah, and they behave in a corporately social responsible manner in the market, although the market is one where it's demand and supply. This here has to do with what do you call it? Environmental responsibility, behavior, sustainability here in terms of doing things in a sustainable manner and using resources fairly. So this is important. I like this diagram because it speaks to the many aspects of corporate social responsibility that a lot of organizations pay a lot of lip service to, but honestly, do they actually follow through? And if you work in an organization and they are a bit two-faced when it comes to certain things, how does it make you feel when you realize that they are being two-faced about it? That's something that leads to something that occurs in us, called, for those of you who did sociology or psychology, it's called, trying to remember the term, is cognitive dissonance. Have you ever heard that phrase before?
Yes, sir. I feel this because I did both sociology and psychology with the
Right.
introductory
So
courses.
cognitive dissonance occurs when the actions of your actions or the actions of an organization that you work in do not agree with how you feel something should be. And what happens when you work in environments or you operate in an environment where you start to experience cognitive dissonance, you will begin to actually respond to it or react to it in one way or the other. You're either going to succumb to the dissonance and then eventually change your position and forget about it, basically, or you will get so upset about it you will leave the job or you'll remove yourself from that particular situation. What you decide to do is a lot of that is dependent upon your strength of will and that type of stuff. So something for you to think about from there. Okay, so the developmental process that continues. Now, regardless of what people tell you, leadership is not a series of steps. There are no easy steps that you can follow, though there are lots of programs out there about leadership that tells you, there are different steps to getting into to become a leader and this kind of stuff. That's just what's the word on it? That's just unfair marketing. That is not very truthful. Leadership is a realistic method of developing a way of thinking. You have to develop your personal philosophy of leadership, which is one of the things that you have to work on, that is driven by your core values, that focus on you working with other people to make change. Right? Coming back to the definition that we talked about. So it's not something that can be defined as leadership as a matter of working in a particular set of steps. The leadership development process requires that we make changes, and change is is a paradigm shifting behavior. So let's start to speak about the paradigm of hard work. Most of us growing up would have known about that paradigm of hard work. How many are familiar with that? If you work hard, you will succeed. Have you ever been told that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we this program or this something is going to tell us that okay, that paradigm of working hard, we need to amend that to from working harder to working smarter. And when we say working smarter, we're referring to collectively smarter, reflectively smarter, and spiritually smarter. So let's work that out. Collectively smarter, very simple. All of us is smarter than one of us. That is where collaboration and compromise comes in, because we collectively bring more to bear on the circumstances and perceptions of the situation than just one person. And therefore, we will see things differently. And therefore, collectively, if we listen to each other effectively and we work together effectively, we will make a better decision than if just one of us made a decision. That is
No
the
one part is greater than the whole.
correct, yes. All right, so collectively we would make better decisions. That's what it means when we say collectively smarter. Reflectively smarter, taking the time to make meaning out of what happened in the past to gain perception and understanding of what's going on now. This is something that we tend to fail at all the time. Reflectively smarter means that we must, when we do things, sit back and look at what happened and understand why what happened took place and what we can possibly do to improve the outcomes that we're talking about. And this can be from personal decisions that we make to business decisions that we make. Any decision, if we sit and think about why this is happening and try to make sure that it doesn't happen another time by thinking about it and reflecting upon it, then we can actually get to be making better decisions because we've reflected on it. Consider, for example, thinking about the relationships you've had and why a lot of your relationships seem to be the same thing over and over again. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, so it sounds like it's in real deep there, but so.
Well, because it's true. A lot of us behave in the same way in our relationships, but we expect different results when we behave in the same manner. What do you think is like
Definition
that?
of insanity.
Correct, but that doesn't mean we don't do it. All right. But one of the reasons why we may have or we may continue to behave in the same manner, excuse me, is because we haven't taken the time to reflect and think about what we did and what maybe we should do to change things in the future.
So we're doing it, but we don't even realize that hey, he and I are doing the same thing over and over. And
Yeah, because I mean, when relationships and anything for that matter is complicated. It's not just something that happens bam, bam, bam. It takes time for things to go through a process. But if you really sit down and look back at your life and look at different things that have happened that maybe you like or you didn't like, and it's important to look at both. Things that went well, you need to look at that and why did it go well, and how do I duplicate that? As
What about
opposed
this
to
saying where you are trapped where you are?
you are trapped where you are.
Yeah.
You need to elaborate on that.
Okay, so for example,
wait, I think
you know they
she's
say
saying you are
hurting people
trapped
normally
in
hurt
what
others.
you are.
What you are or where you are?
What you are, where you are. I feel like I kind of understand what you're trying to say.
All right. So I kind of missed what you said because two of you were speaking at the same time. All right. So Nadia, if it's Nadia who's speaking, could you say it again? What you were talking about?
You attract to what you are or where you are.
All right. You attract what you are.
Or where you are.
Where you are. Well, there's some truth to that, yes, because what you put out is what you're going to get back. But if you are unaware of what you're putting out, because you haven't reflected on, well, what am I doing that is causing these results, and
Right.
and that's one of the things that that happens a lot. Somebody put a hand up or something.
No, someone asked if we're getting
So,
any mini break.
Karishma, I want to know if we're getting a mini break, sir.
A mini break?
Yes, sir.
A water break, a
Yes,
bathroom
sir, a
break.
mini break.
We didn't get one last week.
Only water break. We still have
Listen,
something like 70 slides to go. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all the slides. You all can go to the essence.
70 sizes, yes, sir?
Yeah, there's 74 slides altogether. Then I get to this
The
one.
question in general, do you normally
What's
give like a
that- what's that
5-minute
your-
break in between?
Well, I should be giving you a break to get up and take a stretch and stuff like that. It's not a good idea to be sitting this long. I know some of you all are on phones and stuff, so you're getting up and stretching and doing what you want. But I am seated. So you want to do. But
I'm
this
still,
one
I
has,
just,
this one has a recording with it, so it has there are you all could go ahead and look at the recording and try to get an understanding of what they're talking about. But what you're talking about there is important, because if you don't spend time to reflect on why you are doing what you're doing, then you're not going to actually make changes, effective changes. All right. Yes, I better give you all a break, because if people are, and then we'll try and get back together and kind of wrap up. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's cool, sir. I guess then you could probably pause the recording.
No, I'll have to stop and start.
Is that possible?
Let me see. No, I'll just have to stop and start. I'll stop it and somebody remind me to start it back on this.